You hear a lot of talk about hitting net zero emissions, right? But what do the world's most important climate models, the ones governments and scientists rely on, actually say we need to do? Well, today we're going to cut through all that noise and look directly at the blueprint from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Ipcc. And spoiler alert, it projects a massive role for nuclear energy. Okay, let's get into it.
Here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll tackle the sheer scale of the energy challenge we're facing. Then we'll look at what the IPCC's models say nuclear power needs to do. After that, we'll get real about what that costs and requires. And finally, we'll ask the big question, what does this all mean for our low-carbon future?
All right, first up, the global energy challenge. This is the fundamental problem that climate scientists and energy modelers are all trying to wrap their heads around. And honestly, it's a beast.
So think about it this way. Right now, if you add up all the energy the world uses for our cars, for heating our homes, for all of heavy industry, electricity is only about 20% of that pie. The other 80%, that's mostly from burning fuels directly, like the gasoline in your tank or the natural gas in your furnace. Now, this is where things get really wild. To hit our climate targets, the IPCC models say that by 2050, electricity needs to jump from powering 20% of our world to powering almost 55% of it. This is so much bigger than just adding a few more solar panels. We're talking about a fundamental rewiring of modern society, electrifying pretty much all of our transportation, industry, and heating. And here's the real kicker. We have to do all of that while the total global demand for energy just keeps on climbing. In some scenarios, the world's need for energy could nearly double by 2100. So that's the crucial point, right? We have to solve two massive problems at the exact same time: expand our energy supply and completely decarbonize it. So, if that's the challenge, what do the models say is the solution? This brings us to the IPCC's nuclear blueprint, and it really shows why this energy source features so heavily in pretty much all of these future scenarios. Let's just start with the most dramatic, eye-popping number. In one of the IPCC's main scenarios, a pathway called P3, the world's nuclear power capacity needs to increase six-fold by 2050. Let that sink in, a 6x expansion. That is absolutely staggering. Now, you might be thinking, okay, a six-fold increase, that has to be the most extreme outlier, right? Well, yes and no. It's on the higher end, for sure. But when you look across all 85 successful climate pathways the IPCC studied, the median projection is still for nuclear capacity to double or even triple. In fact, over 80% of the scenarios that actually work, the ones that keep us on track, require more nuclear power, not less. So these are just models, numbers on a screen. What would it actually take to make this happen in the real world? Let's talk about the price of power and translate these abstract ideas into some very concrete requirements. It's pretty simple. More reactors means you need a lot more fuel. This table just lays it out perfectly. Today, we use about 67,500 tons of uranium every year. To hit that median IPCC projection, we'd need to at least double that, maybe even triple it. And for that 6x scenario, we're talking over 400,000 tons of uranium every single year. That means a massive, massive ramp up in global mining and processing just to keep the lights on. And you can't just flip a switch and get a nuclear plant. The sources really hammer home this idea of a critical time lag. From the moment a new plant gets a green light, it can take anywhere from 10 to 19 years before it actually starts generating power. Think about that. It means the decisions we need to make to hit our 2050 targets, they have to be made right now, yesterday even. The scale of this whole effort is it's immense. So let's run through a few numbers back to back here. To make this vision a reality, the world would need to invest over $100 billion in nuclear energy. Not just once, every single year from now until 2050. And all that money has to go somewhere, right? It has to go into actually building things. The global rate of new reactor construction would have to quadruple. To put that into perspective, right now we add about 7 gigawatts of new capacity a year. That would need to skyrocket to between 25 and 30 gigawatts annually. So when you put it all together, what does it add up to? In some scenarios, we're talking about building as much as 800 gigawatts of brand new nuclear capacity by mid-century. That's more than double the entire nuclear fleet that's operating in the world today. Okay, so given all of that, the cost, the fuel, the sheer industrial scale, it brings us to our final question. Is nuclear power truly an indispensable tool? Let's take a look at the stakes here. What's really interesting is that there's not one single game plan. You've really got two different stories playing out across the globe. In developed countries like the US and in Europe, the main focus is on life extensions for existing plants and developing smaller modular reactors. But in emerging economies, especially in Asia, it's a totally different story. The race is on to build massive, new, large-scale power plants, with China leading the charge.
So what's the alternative? What happens if we decide this is all just too hard and we don't build out nuclear? Well, the reports are pretty clear on that. If nuclear's share of global energy actually goes down, meeting our climate goals would cost an extra $500 billion. Why? Because replacing that steady, 24/7 carbon-free power is a much harder and way more expensive problem to solve. And that really brings us to the core takeaway from all of this source material. It's a quote that just cuts right to the heart of the matter. Achieving our climate goals will be, and I quote, harder, riskier, and more expensive without a significant expansion of nuclear power. The models really couldn't be any clearer on this point. So we're left with this huge idea. The climate models, which are our best blueprints for a net zero future, have mapped out a very clear path forward. And that path relies heavily on nuclear energy. The math is there, the requirements are known. So the only real question left is the world ready to actually build it?